Black Lagoon is an old ass show. Its sequences are over the top and, like, look at this shit. Not really grounded in reality. You know something is anime when a nigga is out here cutting bullets in half with a samurai sword. Or a maid is doing shit like this. Yeah. It's no fucking surprise that I love this show. Since I just so happen to love this movie, this manga, you know, this show. Hi, you got me. Last one was irrelevant. Mostly. The list goes on. But for all the action, badass scenes, cool character designs, introductions, or a brother actually done well with aura in the show. My favorite episode, scene, or possibly even face-off in all of anime has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. Black Lagoon is an anime based on the still ongoing manga of the same name, written and illustrated by Rei Hiroe. The manga began serialization in 2002 in Shokugaku's monthly Gundai Gen X. The anime adaptation, produced by my GOAT, Madhouse, aired in 2006 and ran for 2 seasons, followed by a crazy-ass 5-episode OVA titled Roberta's Blood Trail that covered some episodes in the show in typical movie fashion. Our 2 primary protagonists of the show are Rock and Revy. Revy is what I like to call your atypical badass female character with mostly 0 fan service. Yes, I said mostly because I don't really count the outfit, since, you know, that's more of a statement and story setting piece, you know. In case you're new to the space, this is pretty fucking rare, not gonna lie. Like, there's a pretty big difference to me between sexually enticing viewers and showing viewers the grittiness of the world they belong to. And actually, Revy's design is heavily inspired by Chow Yun-fat's gun-wielding roles in John Woo films, and the entire setting of the world is actually located and inspired by real-life crime-ridden locations in Thailand and Southeast Asia. And did I mention Thailand? Although there are many interesting characters in the show, this show, and for this episode, is really centered around our 2 primary main characters, Rock and Revy. Revy, or Two Hands as she's called, is basically a badass, and the show makes every effort to show us that. But the show doesn't shy away from showing us how brutal, selfish, and somewhat self-hating that she also is. From the get-go, this show lets us know that even though these are our main characters and, you know, we'll be following them around for the next 2 seasons, and therefore the closest things we'll get to good guys in these parts. At the end of the day, bro, they're fucking pirates, man. Rock, on the other hand, was the real surprise to me. And, you know, the X factor that really makes this shit stand out. I don't think I've ever really seen a character like him yet. Probably. At least in the setting he shows up in, with the background he has and the things he has to go through.
This cannot be made public, Okajima. For the sake of the 50,000 employees of Asahi Industries, disappear into the South China Sea. You'll be promoted up to assistant manager, and I'll also request that the president and all of the other board members attend your funeral.
Betrayed by his employers in Japan. Look, those guys live and die for their work. A lot of people say that a person can spend almost an entire 1/6 of their life working. And that doesn't even take into account, you know, school, by the way. But I feel like Japan has to have at least 2 times that. Like, I love going to Japan, but God knows I would ask for a respawn if I somehow, on some 6-dimensional shit, knew I'd be getting paid more than min wage and had employee benefits in a different country, not gonna lie. From episode 1, Rock introduces the character that was betrayed by his company for money. Being betrayed and sold off by his employers to keep their own interest was equivalent to being betrayed by society to him. Like, I would feel betrayed too if I somehow survived high school, got into work with the expectation that this is my life now, and I'm going to have to put that life and being a benefit to society and my company above my own. And I got betrayed for my company's own benefits.
Well then.
Yeah,
Like, fuck no. Very early in the show, Rock comes off as a square, and it's his understanding and liberation from the box he's lived in all his life, as well as finding his own value outside of that box, that made me love his character from the jump. Like, bro has zero combat ability in a world where people are doing shit like this, and still has aura somehow. I don't fucking know how, man. Actually, it's pretty straightforward, but a couple of things first. Did Revy actually hate Rock? Was Rock actually ever free? How did Rock get Revy to change her mind about him? What were their beliefs and how did they clash? Where does Gumball come in? Okay, I'm not answering that one. But before we can even understand any of this, we need to understand what are decisions. Jean-Paul Sartre, a French philosopher, argued that existence proceeds through essence. Basically, this means that all of us are just a sum of all our shitty decisions and future shitty decisions, and are therefore always capable of no longer making shitty decisions. This way of thinking sparked a completely new term and way of living for many that I'm sure most people have already heard of: existentialism. So, what would be the opposite of this? Well, that one's future thoughts and actions are always a reflection of their past shitty decisions, identity, upbringing, or social conditions that affected that as a whole. It's the idea that change is impossible, or if you did change, this was already decided before. Basically, if you're cooked, this was already decided as such, and you will always remain cooked. Determinism. This clashing of perspective is an important key behind this episode. Imagine if you grew up broke as fuck, and then a billionaire born into wealth came up to you and started telling you what you could and could not do. You'd be looking like these. Well, that's exactly how Revy viewed Rock. Throughout the show, and all the way up until this episode, Revy viewed Rock as nothing more than the amalgamation of his past identity and upbringing, and every action he took that was in any way humane was classified as him being a completely separate existence to her, and a reminder of the type of person that she was and would never be able to change.
Fuck. Raised in a loving family. I hate hearing that fucking shit.
This was led by two key factors. Viewing Rock's past through rose-tinted glasses. Putting that life on an internal pedestal without actually thinking about the hardships it could come with. Revy didn't respect Rock. Pretty straightforward. Rock didn't do anything to earn her respect by, being wishy-washy with his beliefs either, let's be real. Every time Rock showed any kind of empathy or challenged her worldview, Revy would crash the fuck out, not gonna lie. This ultimately controlled Rock's actions. Imagine moving to the other side of the world for freedom, only to be right back in the situation where you originally started, with no other than the ability to goon and play Marvel Rivals all day, which I'm sure none of my subs do. We better than that. According to this definition, free will is basically just the ability to always be capable of acting upon one's own discretion. And according to this definition, it's geared more towards the idea of freedom within your capabilities. A homeless man may not have the ability to buy a sports car, but he does have the ability to get his life back and work towards that. Basically, free will isn't a superpower like America would have you think. It's the ability to make choices within the ones available to you, without some kind of intervention preventing you at that point in time. Fate basically just means no rubbish talk like determinism. And finally, the crux of this argument, necessity. So, for example, if you steal food because you choose to, that's free will. If you steal food because you're starving and have no other option, that's more out of necessity. Your survival is forcing the action. So this got me thinking, what about the consequences of your actions? Doesn't that negate free will? How can you be free to make a choice if you're constantly scared of the outcome? But this definition has no room for that shit. Meaning free will is defined by the consequences and not negated. So just because there are consequences to your actions doesn't mean you don't have free will. It just means you have a weighted choice. So for example, if you choose not to play Marvel Rivals because you want to touch grass, that's still your choice. You're exercising free will by considering the consequences. If you couldn't play Marvel Rivals, even if you wanted to, then your lack of action wouldn't be a choice. It would be a limitation. So yes, according to this definition, as long as you have the capabilities to make a decision, regardless of the consequences, that is still considered free will. And it adds up because there will always be consequences to your actions. Even what seems like the safest options can inevitably lead to a negative outcome. Low-key, that's what consequences are. Just a negative outcome. And you can't always have a positive one. Look, I'm going to save you a fucking rabbit hole I almost fell into researching this video, and tell you outright that there are technically some philosophers that downright reject the notion that free will even exists. And this definition is based solely on libertarian free will. There are many other versions of free will. Because let's be real, what man is actually completely, truly free? So, in a way, I somewhat agree with Revi's take that
the moral of the story is when you're living on the edge, that's all that matters to you, because that's all you've really got. Not everyone can get off on being normal, Rock.
And I think most people are forever trapped by that, with the exception being the rule. Because Rock was supposed to be naturally subservient to the people above him, diligent and a workaholic. If that's the case, which Rock is this? Of course, the argument could also be had that this was the original Rock and the meek, subservient one was a suppressed version of him. Regardless, there he is, back to being a meek, subservient man towards Revi, allowing her moral spectrum and worldview to not only shape his, back to where he fucking started. Random, but if someone held a fucking gun to your head and said,
gun to the back of your head, name 5 DDG songs.
Pink Dreads, Moonwalking in Calabasas, Pink Dreads. Look, you're going to be a good little boy and try to think of 5 before you get cooked. And if he tells you to strip as well, most people would do that too, out of fear. And that will always be a wall to most people and the choices they want to make. People that overcome this wall could be called idiots or retarded by, a lot of people that aren't able to. And trust me, there's a vast difference between putting your life on the line for absolutely no reason
Shut your bitch ass up!
versus standing on your beliefs and what you believe you stand for, even in the face of a gun in your face. Why do you think these people were capable of rising to power? You can see how easy it is to manipulate someone with no strong beliefs or worldview. You don't need the answer to do that. You just need an answer. Shit doesn't even have to make sense for real. All this to say, there's a clear but obvious build-up in this particular episode. Over multiple episodes, Rock's power and sway is lowered by Revi's as his beliefs are shaken. Shit's done perfectly. From his worldview being questioned, told they don't matter, where he is right now, and finally told that he just ain't built like her. And for most people, I think it's easy to understand exactly how you would just up and say, damn, maybe this bitch is right. There was a clear build-up of power in Rock's direction. That power came from his capabilities and using his mind, where Revi's methods didn't work. And that build-up led to him building a belief that his worldview worked in the middle of the fucking Caribbean, packed with gangsters and criminals. And ladyboys.
じゃあもう一度だ。俺は間違っちゃいないし、謝るようなこともない。そう言ってんだ。
This is how one overcomes a lack of belief. One of the reasons why shonen anime or manga like Dragon Ball Z, Bleach, Naruto or One Piece resonate so much with younger people is because younger people don't have a realized worldview or moral compass. So seeing a protagonist stand on their beliefs is an inspiring moment for kids who currently only believe in TikTok and don't even look past what they want the next day. And for me at the time, finding ways to get my PS5 when my parents hate that shit. There are many more books that my dumbass certainly has not read that go into this topic in a lot more detail with both the psychological and scientific stances. But one thing I will say they all touch on in depth is the pure power of belief. Actually, to change this, the correct word I should have been using is actually will and not belief. And that's actually where the term free will comes from. Where belief is more passive, so for example, you can believe in something without actually acting upon it. Will is active, filled with more power, and I would say it's a better fitting term for my above example. To will means to act. Willing something and not acting upon it is belief and not will. Some could even call it delusion, not gonna lie. And according to Nietzsche, the act of acting upon one's will and failing is still an extension of will, because the key factor is the attempt, the striving, and the exertion of one's power. There are countless examples of an extremely strong will leading to historic and even sometimes supernatural effects. But all of this just to say,
My name is Jalen, and I am a Super Saiyan.
Rock was never at any point in the show shown as something outside of a man who was just looking for a place where he could move and make decisions according to his will, where his choices actually mattered and weren't at the whims of someone else's. Revi, on the other hand, is purely assumed to be centered solely on money, which is a lie, and we'll get to why in a moment. We get the backstory pieces she throws at us after a crash out, and honestly, I would just shut my mouth too. Revi explains a story that I think perfectly captures who she is as a person.
I believed in God right up until that night the cops beat the hell out of me for no reason at all. All they saw when they looked at me was another little ghetto rat with no power and no God. What's left for a poor little Chinese bitch to rely on? It's money, of course, and guns. Fucking A.
A world with no heroes. Nobody to look up to. Except for the green. That's how she's lived. How she's survived up until now. And this raises another interesting question. As I mentioned before on the definition of free will, is Revi truly acting on that? On her own free will? After all, according to her story, she was forced to always choose the ruthless option. And according to this definition, that isn't free will, it's survival.
There are no heroes in this life! And what's all this about pride? Fuck your pride. Look around you. It's shit as far as the eye can see. I hate to break it to you, but there is no fucking Robin Hood.
If there's no Robin Hood, then why don't you become Robin Hood?
Rock hits Revi with one of the heaviest quotes I think I've ever seen in anime. Funny enough, bro has a book of them in this scene for some reason. He is actually pushing back against Revi's worldview, pointing out the contradictions within it. Revi hasn't been working to make any type of difference in the world. Heck, she hasn't even been living according to her own will. She's just been...
That's all I know how to do!
surviving. Rock's decision to stay wasn't just a random act of rebellion. It was a realization that he had a choice. And that's what makes this moment so impactful. In a world where it feels like you're trapped, where it can feel like everything pushes you in one direction, Rock says, fuck that. There's a lingering moment at the end of this scene that truly solidifies this episode as one of the greatest I've ever watched. We're Revy and Rock, both now with a closer understanding of each other's stances and worldview, and almost an acceptance towards each other's view, are sitting in the back of a police car after. Both are perfectly calm in a world where the cops can only hold them for public street violence for a couple hours, and they're allowed to smoke in the back of a police van. And Revy asks Rock the question.
So, I just want to know which side you want to be on.
And my guy answers,
I'm right here where I'm sitting, Revy. I'm not anywhere else.
If you watched all the way to the end, I genuinely hope that you at least enjoyed the video or took something from it, because I genuinely had fun making it. And yeah, like, you're already here, you might as well like the video. You might as well, or maybe drop a sub. That's also greatly appreciated. And catch you in the next one. Peace.